Yajirobe came to deliver the Senzu beans at Master Korin's request, and as he flew back to Korin Tower in his vehicle, he was suddenly hit by an energy blast that blew his vehicle into pieces. Fortunately, he survived the explosion, as despite being lazy and not training for years, he was still quite strong and resilient for a normal human. Bardock and the others were shocked to realize they couldn't sense the android's ki, so while Gohan went to rescue Yajirobe from drowning in the ocean where he had fallen, the other warriors spread out across the city to find the androids before they could cause more collateral damage or even more victims. Eventually, Yamcha encountered androids 20 and 19, getting badly injured by these androids. Upon sensing his ki drop, the others arrived to help him and pull him out of trouble, with Krillin taking him to Bulma to get a Senzu bean. The others forced the androids to move to another deserted island where there would be fewer civilians who could fall victim to their fights. However, while flying, Bardock couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that things weren't happening as they were supposed to. His future self hadn't given them an exact description of what the androids looked like, but by the way he spoke about them, Bardock was almost certain that the androids his future self had fought weren't simply an old man and a fat clown. But one thing was sure, these were androids, and whether or not they were the same as the ones from the future, they needed to be eliminated. Upon arriving at the place where they would fight, Bardock and Piccolo first attempted to gather more information from the androids and understand more about their intentions. Android 20 spoke in a strange way, as if it were personal, almost as if he himself were Dr. Gero. He denied this, however, and left Android 19 to fight one of them. Goku wanted to fight first, but Raditz shoved him aside, expressing his strong desire to fight before anyone else. This annoyed Goku a bit, but he accepted, thinking he would at least have the chance to fight the other android. At this point, it wasn't even necessary to show the Super Saiyan form to the androids. Raditz fought in his base form, as he had become tremendously powerful after those 3 years of training and mastering the transformation in its 4th grade, significantly increasing his base state. The battle would have a very similar outcome to the one in the original story with Vegeta. Raditz ultimately destroyed the android completely, blowing his body apart with a powerful attack that left only the head barely intact. Android 20, terrified by this absurd display of power, and recalling that, according to the data, Raditz was supposedly the weakest of them all, attempted to escape and return to his lab. But then, in the distance, they heard a voice that grew louder and louder, shouting, "He's mine!" repeatedly. Eventually, arriving at full speed into the combat zone, Vegeta transformed into a Grade 2 Super Saiyan, delivered a single kick that decapitated Dr. Gero. This individual was none other than Vegeta, groaning with satisfaction at finally defeating an enemy. He grabbed the remaining parts of Gero's body and disintegrated them completely. Shortly after, Nappa arrived at the battle zone, apologizing to everyone for their delay, as Vegeta insisted on training until the last possible minute to be as strong as he could be. Everyone found this extreme and pathetic on Vegeta's part, but after this anticlimactic moment, Bardock couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. He refused to believe that this was all, that his future self would have had trouble against such pathetic, weak androids. It was simply impossible. And indeed, seconds later, his future self arrived at the battlefield, this time accompanied by a young warrior, future Trunks. Bardock and Trunks, both surprised and confused, observed the remnants of androids 20 and 19. In an alarming and worried tone, they informed everyone that these were not the androids they had fought in the future. Present Bardock put his hand to his face, knowing that it was too easy to be true. It was impossible for that to be all, but now the question remained: where were the real androids? After confirming with the future Bardock that the androids they fought weren't the ones from the future with whom the elder Bardock had battled, everyone began to wonder where on Earth those androids were. Meanwhile, Vegeta was cursing everyone and everything because no one was paying attention to his 2nd grade Super Saiyan power. Eventually, Bulma arrived at the area where all the warriors were. Upon examining the remains of the destroyed androids, she confirmed, as Piccolo had theorized, that at least one of them was none other than Dr. Gero himself. Bulma then pointed out the location of Dr. Gero's not-so-secret laboratory. The two Bardocks cursed both present and future Bulma for never thinking to tell them this before. Without further delay, everyone headed there, but as they approached the direction of Dr. Gero's laboratory, they sensed a gigantic, monstrous ki appearing at the location, far greater than anything they had ever felt. Upon arrival, they found the mountain housing the laboratory completely destroyed. Emerging from the smoke was a strange insect-like humanoid figure wearing a smug and satisfied smile, clearly pleased with the advantageous situation. The being introduced himself as Cell, the bio-android created by Dr. Gero. who had returned from a distant future to absorb androids 17 and 18 to achieve his perfect form. Everyone was shocked by this revelation, wondering what had become of the Cell of their present. The Cell before them assured them not to worry. He had already destroyed the underground laboratory where his past self was being developed, ensuring that only one perfect being would exist in the universe regardless of the timeline. Cell, brimming with confidence over having quickly and easily achieved his perfect form, invited everyone to attack him simultaneously to test his immense new power, despite being quite hungry after not having the chance to feed on the energy of millions of humans as in the original timeline. As everyone prepared to attack, Present Bardock suddenly burst into a loud laugh, confusing everyone with his attitude. He, who was usually the most concerned about the situation, was now taking it the lightest. This perplexed even his future self until the latter understood why he was laughing. Future Bardock asked Present Bardock if he had achieved it. When Present Bardock confirmed with a nod while finishing his laughter, Future Bardock also began to laugh, enraging Cell at what he perceived as a blatant insult. In a way, Cell was right. The laughter was indeed meant as a mockery, but it also signified something more. For the first time since Future Bardock had arrived 3 years prior to warn them of the impending threats, Present Bardock felt deeply relieved. The battle was over before it even began. Unable to tolerate the mockery and arrogance, Cell decided not to wait for them to attack and lunged directly at Present Bardock to kill him. However, Bardock swiftly moved away from the group and exploded into an enormous aura of electric ki in the sky. Cell could not believe the power he was sensing. Kakarot and Raditz also realized what was happening and began laughing, understanding that their father had outsmarted everyone, even them, after years of training together. Present Bardock revealed to everyone, including Cell, that he had achieved Super Saiyan 2. His immense power far exceeded that of Cell, who, despite his perfect form, had not received any Zenkai boosts and was even weaker than his original timeline counterpart, having absorbed far fewer humans before merging with the androids. Thanks to his sustained Saiyan youth, Present Bardock had gone beyond what his future self had been able to achieve and attained the same power his future self had only briefly experienced before becoming too old to reach it again. Seeing the grand scheme of things, Bardock realized that Cell posed no real threat. Despite Cell's desperate and arrogant attacks, Bardock effortlessly dodged every one, eventually trapping Cell and throwing him high into the sky, nearly leaving Earth's atmosphere. Bardock then unleashed a massive ki attack, completely disintegrating the creature without leaving any chance for regeneration. Everyone was left stunned by the anticlimactic end. However, with Cell defeated, the androids were also no longer a threat. This marked the end of the android saga, with the time travelers having successfully altered the future to create a better present, albeit in another timeline. After all that, technically the events of the android saga had concluded. There wasn't much left for Future Bardock and Future Trunks to do, though they would still face serious problems upon returning to the future. Future Bardock remained an elderly man incapable of accessing his former powers, and Trunks was still too weak and inexperienced to defeat the surviving android, let alone the Cell who would awaken in their distant future. However, Present Bardock had an idea, a gift to offer his future self. Bardock gathered the Dragon Balls and summoned Shenron, wishing for Future Bardock to regain the youth of his present counterpart. Future Bardock immediately felt the effects of the wish, regaining his youthful appearance and the prolonged Saiyan vitality. Thanks to this unexpected gift from his past self, Future Bardock was now able to tap into his true warrior potential once again. He quickly regained control over Super Saiyan 1 and 2, enabling him to train Trunks for a few more years to prepare him for future threats. This ensured that when the distant day arrived when Future Bardock would die of old age, Earth's future would be safe under Trunks' protection. Future Bardock expressed his immense gratitude to his past self for the opportunity he had given them. Following this, he and Trunks returned to the future. With his youth and powers restored, Future Bardock wasted no time in confronting the surviving android. Transforming into Super Saiyan 2, he obliterated the android instantly, putting an end to any android threat. 3 years later, Future Bardock similarly dispatched the alternate Cell, who was still in his imperfect form and thus far easier to defeat. At last, the future was safe, at least for the time being. In the present, life resumed its course. However, everyone continued training as much as they could, especially Vegeta, who felt utterly useless with his second-grade Super Saiyan power. Determined to catch up, he resolved to give it his all to attain the same power Bardock had used against Cell. Although Gine wasn't a warrior or passionate about training, she refused to waste the training she had undergone during those 3 years just because the world was now at peace. The future had taught them that a new threat could always emerge, capable of taking everything from them. While training wasn't her primary focus and she didn't do it as intensely as the rest of her family, she continued to train to maintain and refine the power she had gained. This also motivated her son Gohan to do the same, compelling Chi-Chi to allow him to balance his studies and training. After all, Gohan was a Saiyan and the son of Kakarot and grandson of Bardock. Denying that heritage would be cruel and foolish. Ultimately, Gine convinced Chi-Chi, albeit reluctantly, to be more flexible with Gohan's studies and free time activities. During this period, Goten was born. Bardock and Goku found it amusing that the second son resembled his father and grandfather far more than the first. The rest of the family continued training with Bardock, inspired by the power of Super Saiyan 2, which over the next 7 years, they all gradually achieved. Goku, Raditz, Gohan, and even Gine, though she was undoubtedly the weakest among them. Vegeta and Nappa also eventually reached Super Saiyan 2, but much later than the others and were still weaker than even Gine, a true disgrace, Vegeta thought.